Hello viewers and welcome back to my channel. I am Dr. Nachi Sinha and today's video is connected to my previous videos on emotional abuse. If you wonder what emotional abuse is, what its signs are, how to end it, and how to help emotional abuse victims, check out my previous videos. It will give you detailed answers to all your emotional abuse questions. Coming back to today's video, I will discuss how emotional abuse hurts the victims. Many people believe that emotional abuse hurts victims for a short period. The victims feel sad about the verbal abuse and that's it. The effects of emotional abuse are long lasting. They can push the person towards clinical depression and destroy their mental health. So let's start discussing how emotional abuse hurts the victim. First, I will discuss the short-term problems that emotional abuse victims face. And the first and most common problems that they face are: number 1. Self-doubt and confusion. The first damage that results from emotional abuse is that victims begin to doubt themselves and their judgments. This happens due to the gaslighting by their abusers. The term gaslighting means when the abuser denies the happening of a certain incident and makes the victim believe that they are imagining things. In gaslighting situations, abusers very conveniently brush off the matters and tell the victims that they are overthinking stuff, going crazy, or just making the stuff up. This leads the victim to question himself. He begins doubting his reality and gets confused if their abusers are right. This may be a short-term effect of abuse, but it continues even after the victim has left the abuser. The victim will question his decision to leave the abuser. He will have a constant battle in his mind with various thoughts like, maybe my partner wasn't that bad, perhaps it was my fault, I made the wrong decision, etc. This self-doubt, confusion, lack of confidence, etc. hamper their decision-making abilities. Moving on to the second short-term effect, which is fearfulness. How will you feel if you have a scary boss? A boss who always insults you, screams at you, critiques you, or threatens to hurt you? No matter how brave and confident you are, you will feel intimidated by such a boss. Now, imagine living with such a person who is always yelling, mocking, and belittling you. You will live in constant fear. This is what happens with emotional abuse victims. They are afraid of their abusers and will do anything to make them happy. Because the abuser looks for the opportunities to let down the victim and scare him. The constant fear disturbs them mentally. It also affects the victim's performance at work, studies, and other tasks. Moreover, this fear also results in another health problem, which is anxiety. Living in an emotionally abusive relationship is like walking on eggshells or living with a time bomb. You never really know when it will explode. One of the classic signs of emotional abuse is consistent nitpicking. The abuser has a problem with everything the victim does, for example, how they look, how they walk, their qualification, the people victims hang out with, and even how they dress up. A slight inconvenience makes the abuser lose his temper with the victim. They will blame the victim, call him names, make fun of him, etc. This uncertainty of the abuser's outburst keeps the victim fearful about the future. He always worries when the abuser will shout again or insult him. This makes the victim anxious. He always feels like he's living on the edge and trying to predict what will happen in the next minute. And anxiety is not only worrying, it is much more than that. Anxiety also affects physical health. Stomach problems, headaches, fatigue, muscle problems, breathing issues, excessive sweating, etc. are all health problems linked with anxiety. These problems escalate as the anxiety increases. Up next, we will talk about pessimism. Another problem that the victim has to battle with is pessimism. Living or dealing with an abusive person is exhausting. It makes you upset, drains your energy, and makes you lose your hope. The victim gives up the idea of having a happy and fulfilling life. Instead, they simply accept that this is their life, and it will continue to be this miserable forever. And these thoughts emerge due to the invalidation and insults of the abuser. To control and manipulate the victim, abusers always tell them they are not capable of doing anything. They will also make mean and nasty statements that the victim is full of flaws. All of these actions of the abuser lead the victim to believe him. That's why they go through many doubts before parting their ways with the abuser. The fifth short-term problem that emotional abuse victims go through is emotional numbness. Emotional numbness refers to when the victim doesn't feel any emotion. Due to the abuse, he is wounded, but he won't feel bad. Similarly, the victim doesn't feel happy. It's like he becomes numb to emotions. But emotional numbness means suppressing your pain, trauma, and sadness. All the negative feelings are there, but the victim doesn't channel them out to get rid of them. He avoids talking about the abuse because it's traumatic for him. He feels it is difficult to express himself. Hence, all the suffering, pain, and sadness resulting from the abuse are deeply rooted inside him. These negative emotions are harmful to the victim. If he doesn't channel them out, this is what will happen: aggression and hatred. Emotional numbness slowly leads to aggression and strong hatred. The victim feels angry over small things. This is how they take out their sadness and pain of abuse. At first, it will be occasional, but the intensity and frequency of these outbursts will increase later on. They will have a problem managing their anger and other emotions. This is harmful to the victim and those around him. For example, this severe outburst can be harmful to his parents, siblings, or children. Moreover, anger and aggression will also lead to extreme hatred towards the abuser. The thoughts of inflicting the same pain and harm on the abuser will cross the victim's mind, which is not healthy for them. Another thing that will happen is that they will start becoming angry at themselves. The victim will blame himself for not doing anything about the abuse or not stopping the abuser from controlling them. The victim will be trapped in a cycle of blame, guilt, and anger, and will have trouble focusing on other important matters of his life. These were the short-term effects of the emotional abuse. Long-term problems. Sleeping disorders. Emotional abuse victims might engage themselves in work or some other hobbies, but nights are the hardest. When everyone is sleeping and no one is around them, their mind wanders off to thinking about the abuse that they had experienced. They think about all the times when they were shouted at, insulted, mocked, bullied, and not respected by their partner. This makes them stressed, remorseful, and a feeling of despair takes over. They often cry themselves to sleep, or just think about what they did wrong to make their partners abuse them. A night of quality sleep is very important for the human body. Low quality or disturbed sleep affects the person's mood, focus, diet, and overall health. He becomes cranky, lethargic, and disturbed during the day. Another long-term issue that the victim might face is nightmares. If a person ends an abusive relationship and parts ways with the abuser, his brain takes a long time to forget the abuse. All the terrible experiences of emotional abuse stay fresh in the person's subconscious mind and emerge to the surface when the conscious mind goes to sleep. The victim often suffers from nightmares or flashbacks of the emotional abuse. So, instead of forgetting about the trauma, they experience it again. Some nightmares are so intense that the victim wakes up afraid with increased heartbeat, sweating, and dizziness. The victim has to take professional help to sleep peacefully at night without nightmares. Moving on to another problem, the victim becomes highly prone to contracting this problem, and if he does so, it will affect every area of life. Seeking comfort in drugs. When a person is under constant stress, fear, and no hope of betterment, he finds comfort in drugs. The substances used relaxes the victim's mind and gives him the short-lived happiness lacking in his life. At first, he will start using the drugs to soothe his brain from all the stress and pain, but eventually he'll become addicted to it and use it more frequently. Not every victim needs to find solace in drugs, no, but most people indulge in alcohol and other drugs to part their ways with reality and numb their pain. Substance abuse and addiction can ruin a person's life. It affects your brain, organs, thinking capabilities, and a career. Furthermore, being addicted to drugs also harms your relationship with other people in life. such as your kids, friends, and other family members. Moving on to the 10th problem of emotional abuse, which is trust issues. One of the most damaging effects of emotional abuse is that the victim's self-confidence and esteem are blown into shred by the abuser. The abuser will constantly remind the victim that he is not good enough, has lots of problems, and can never please anyone. These hurtful remarks find a permanent place in the victim's mind, and they believe that they're not good enough. They have a hard time trusting and opening up to people. They doubt themselves about doing or achieving something because they remember the remarks of their abusers. The minors who have suffered the traumatic experience of emotional abuse have severe trust issues. They have had a hard time accepting the appreciation and praise from people because they aren't used to positive comments. These minors also face the trouble of experiencing themselves with their potential love interests. Another similar problem that arises due to emotional abuse is that the victim always seeks approval. As discussed earlier, emotional abuse shatters self-esteem. The victim is forced to believe that he can never do anything right. This leads the victim to push his stride and do everything in his power to make his abuser happy. This constant urge to make people happy and earn their appreciation gets deeply rooted inside the victim. And even after ending the abusive relationship, the person doesn't get free to seek approval. He tries his best to make people around him happy and seek their approval. Sometimes they would go to the extreme just to please people around them, even if it involves harming their physical or mental health. And even when people acknowledge his efforts and praise him, it isn't enough for them. He becomes obsessed with pleasing people just to prove that his abuser was wrong and that he can make people happy. This unhealthy trait creates problems for them to focus on other important things in their lives. Plus, it makes them prone to be controlled and manipulated by other people. The last problem that I will discuss now is quite a scary one: suicidal thoughts. In severe cases of emotional abuse, where the victim thinks he's trapped at the mercy of his abuser, suicidal thoughts are quite common to cross over one's mind. The constant verbal abuse, disrespect, mean jokes, and hurtful remarks impede the person's ability to think straight and rationally. The victim accepts his life and agrees to what the abuser says about him, and sometimes the only way they can think of to get rid of it is by harming themselves or ending their lives. Suicidal thoughts are also common because the abuser forces the victim to cut off his ties with those around him. This leaves the victim alone and isolated. He sometimes feels like he has no one to turn to or seek support and comfort. People easily identify the victims of physical abuse due to their scars, injuries, or battered faces. However, it is not easy to recognize emotional abuse victims because the hurt inflicted upon them is not physical. Emotional abuse shakes up the victim's confidence, self-esteem, and value. It also triggers their anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, and other behavioral issues. So, if you know any emotional abuse victims, help them get out of the abusive relationship. Be there for them and encourage them to seek professional help to heal their traumas and overcome their negative experiences. In my next video, I will talk about one of the major problems in our society, i.e., shaming and blaming the victim for the abuse. So if you would like to learn more about it, then make sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to get notified. I will see you next time. Until then, take care. Goodbye.